First thing we'd like to talk about is getting kids into good learning environments. As lawmakers, we need to make sure that the kids can be in a situation where they're going to do well, where they're going to succeed, whether that is improving the schools that we have in public schools, fixing the ones that are in the worst shape, or providing alternatives, private alternatives. What does this budget do to address each of those things? How do we move forward with this in education?
Well, I think it's important to understand the entirety of the issue when you're looking at public education. You have charter schools, cyber charter schools, the public schools, and then you also have private schools and parochial schools. I think every parent wants their child to have the best opportunity to learn. Like, nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I want to send my kid to a failing school. No parent says that, right? Children only get one chance at second grade. Like, you have one shot at second grade, and then you go to third grade. So I think it's important that we put kids in the best learning environments possible. Public schools in Carbon County, I think, for the most part, do a very good job. But there's some areas in the state where those public schools are failing terribly, and those parents want those options. They're begging for that option to choose a school for their child to go to. This budget does address education, that we put more money into the public schools. We increased the EITC, and then also the negotiation was to create what they call lifeline scholarships. And this would be to children that are in the bottom 15% of schools, that they could get a direct scholarship out of $100 million, not taking any money at all from the public schools, and let those parents choose if they want to send their child to a private school. And I think it's a good proposal. It's not the right size fit all for everybody, but giving parents options to get their children the best education possible is really what we're trying to do as a caucus.
And speaking directly on that, we did mention that one of the problems in these negotiations is that you've got some parents who really can't afford to or do not want to put their kid in a private school, but they need the public school to be good. They want good public school funding. This wouldn't steal money from that. This is a new way to look at the funding of that.
It's a totally separate line item. There were increases in basic education. This money isn't going anywhere but to these students. It's a new line item. It's new funding. We do have some surpluses in the budget, and this money would be baked in every year to provide those scholarships to those students.
What happened with these negotiations? It seemed like we had a deal, at least with the Senate and the governor, to have this money in there, separate money for this private improvement, if you will. And then things went over back to the House and things went off the rails. What happened here? Can you explain the process and then how do we move forward?
Really, what we've seen since the Democratic majority had taken control of the House is just a lack of leadership, a lack of focus, and the inability to negotiate or really get anything done. And that's just carrying over into this budget. The governor and the Senate Republicans negotiated. They had a deal. I got to say, I wasn't overly enthusiastic about the entirety of the deal. I have a lot of other concerns with the budget. But they did pass it. It wasn't as bad as what the budget that the House Democrats sent over was just crazy. I mean, think about it. They had a 14% spending increase, but yet they cut $170 million out of the intellectual disabilities and autism line item. If you're going to increase spending by 14%, but you're cutting the people that really need the services, the people that we can all agree need services. It just makes no sense to me. They didn't increase any money for home health care workers, which we know there's a shortage of. So, yeah, I mean, I had a lot of underlying issues with what the House Democrats passed over to the Senate. The Senate negotiated. They made it a lot better. And then the governor just turns his back. I mean, he does a press release saying that they have a deal and the Lifeline scholarships are part of it. That was the deal that they made. And then come over here, the House Democrats once again failed to get a budget done. And the governor just turned his back on the deal that he made, and now is pointing fingers at everybody else. If you're going to be a leader, you're going to be in that position. When you make it, when you're in Harrisburg and you make a deal with somebody, you gotta hold true to that. And the governor has failed in that regard. And now we're now July 7th, no budget. Non-preferreds have not been funded. The state schools haven't been funded. Our counties are going to start feeling the pinch. And and it looks like the House Democrats are ready to go home. So it is disappointing.
Not just disappointing, but it leaves us with a question of how do you negotiate moving forward when you've got essentially entities that you can't trust when you've negotiated a deal.
Yeah, but if there's not a trust issue, and the governor saying that he's going to blue line the things that he negotiated, the things that he said he was for, and it's unfortunate. If you have your word, like I can say I'm going to work on these issues, and I'll do my best to try to resolve the issues. Property taxes is a huge issue in my district, and every year I'm out here, banging on the drum to get something done. We've gotten some bills passed, but I can't promise somebody, hey, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to get this done by the fall. I can't make that promise. But if I can go to somebody and I make a promise, say, hey, if you support me on this issue, I'll support you on that issue, then you got to uphold your word, because that's all you have in this game. It's disappointing.
What are we doing with higher education? Higher education spending is out of control. Tuition is out of control. The value doesn't seem to be there anymore. There are other vocational opportunities that need to be funded. We have jobs that need to be filled in this state, and we need educated people to fill them. And then, as we said, the non-preferreds are not done. What's the future of higher ed in Pennsylvania?
Well, I think we're at a critical point right now. We're looking at declining enrollment in our public schools because we have less young people going through the schools, less young people graduating to go into our state universities or higher institutions of higher education. Every employer that I go to is telling me that they're hiring, and they can't find the skilled people to do that with the skill set to do those particular jobs, whether it be HVAC, welders, mechanics, plumbers, as well as nurses and teachers and police officers. So I think if you look at higher ed as a whole, they've really gotten to be a really bloated system, and it seems like the students that are going to those institutions are the ones that really have gotten left out. Constant tuition increases. I would say one of the great programs in our Commonwealth right now is if you join the National Guard, you get free tuition at any state school. I know a lot of folks that go to the military and use the GI Bill to get their 4-year education. So when people say, "Oh, we should give free college for everybody," there are avenues if you serve this country where you're going to get those educational opportunities. So
but nothing comes for free.
No, you have to give that service to your country, and then you get rewarded. So I think it's important that people explore all those opportunities, and then you have your technical schools, which are doing a phenomenal job. And you can come out of school in 2 years at dual enrollment programs in high school with your community college. You can actually graduate high school with an associate's degree if you're going to choose that route to go to higher ed. The non-preferreds, those are dollars that we appropriate every year directly to the 4 universities: Lincoln, Penn State, Pitt, and Temple. That money goes to the universities, and then those universities use that money for in-state tuition. So when you hear people say, "Oh, in-state tuition," if you live in Pennsylvania, you go to those universities, you get a discount for being in-state. That's where those dollars go. Then Penn State also gets money for like the Penn State Extension. They are a land grant. They do a lot of research for agriculture, which is our number 1 and 2. Tourism, agriculture are our 2 biggest industries. So they really do provide a lot. I've always supported that funding. Pitt right now, they got themselves painted into a corner. I don't know how they get out of it. And really, because of that, it's holding up the whole process. So I would hope that, and it goes back to lack of leadership by the House Democrats. They bundled all those universities together knowing that it wouldn't pass. They could unbundle them, get Temple, get Penn State, get Lincoln, was already passed, get that funding out to the schools so those parents aren't wondering what they're going to do next year.
And Lincoln was unique in that they made a commitment to not increase their tuition if we provided that funding, unlike some other schools.
Yeah.
That's something that's really important here.
That is a sticking point in the negotiations, is that they want more money, but at the same time they're gonna up tuition rates. Lincoln did make that commitment, and you've seen that their funding got passed right through the House. So I would like to see the universities be a little bit more accountable for the dollars that they receive, and some transparency. But also, in a time when inflation is skyrocketing, I think they need to look for ways to cut costs so that it's a better value for those students that go there. Because if not, families aren't going to send their kids, even with in-state tuition. If it's that high, they're pricing themselves out of the game. You're not going to have Pennsylvanians that are going to be able to afford to send their kids to those institutions. So I would hope that we, at the end of the day, we get this funding done, and that those schools would then honor the commitment to not raise tuition.